Awesome. Y'all guys feel comfortable spread out like that, or you guys want to sort of just bunch in a little bit? Just bunch in a little bit? We just want to be effective. My only aim is to be helpful today. I just want to clear up anything before I start as far as someone like me having all the answers. I definitely do not have all the answers. But I have found a way that has really worked for me. I get excited sometimes about sharing what this path of recovery has done in me. And then obviously when the transformation takes place in us, it's kind of hard to keep it from going out of us. You know, have you ever noticed that when you get here, you try to adapt to the people beside you? You match your insides to their outsides and you feel very miserably? Can anybody relate to that? That you're steady every day hanging on the coattails of people and you're comparing your chapter 1 to their chapter 9. And every time that you're comparing your chapter 1 to their chapter 9, you're failing miserably because what you're doing is taking away the beauty of what's going on in your life. So I've been asked to read something, and then we can get started. It says, "Welcome to Cocaine Anonymous, the Atlantic South Regional Convention, 2014 in Charleston, South Carolina." This is a workshop on the problem of drug addiction as we see it and the solution. I believe that each step taken properly delivers you to the next. I'm going to take a little twist on this because it's imperative that we realize in order to have drug addicts recovering, we must have a recovered drug addict teaching. So, with that being said, my name's Bradley, and I'm a recovered cocaine addict. And when I say recovered, it's clear. It's important that I'm clear with you on this word because, I know for me, when I got to Cocaine Anonymous, I normally heard a lot of great things, but because of the fear that I was living in, I could very rarely go up to you and ask you what you were saying. I normally hung on to it and just shared it in another meeting, having no clue what I was sharing, to simply make myself feel better in my own skin because I just couldn't stand the way I felt. And so I've been taught through my sponsor that it's imperative that I don't become a CA repeater, that I don't go to meetings and share things that other people shared and have no clue of what I was saying. He said, "Bradley, the next time you hear something that's shared in a meeting that you don't particularly know what it says, walk up to them and kindly ask them, 'Sir, ma'am, this that you said, keep it simple. Could you please explain this to me?'" He said, because 9 times out of 10, they're not going to know themselves. And the reason why I get so fanatic about this literature, and the reason why I get so fanatic about this big book, is because the instructions in it are the miracle. You see, for so long I walked around, thought I was the miracle. Don't we like to think that we're something? I mean, we come in here completely driven by ego, and somewhere, somehow, we think that we can fit in this idea that I'm important. And so I want to think that I'm this miracle. When truthfully, the miracle was the instructions I applied in my life that produced the transformation. Because, see, when I got here, I was the same person that day that I was today. The only difference was the transformation of heart and mind that the instructions brought me. There's the miracle, isn't it? How many people in here today has gotten really good information, applied it to their best ability, and started to undergo this thing called an entire psychic change? Right? You begin to see the outlook of life begin to change. Isn't it funny how you think today, as you're sitting here, and as you look back on this journey, isn't it funny how it don't seem like a lot changed, but as you look back, everything did? Isn't that funny? Like you're walking in recovery, and I can remember my first year, like nothing felt like it was really changing except for I was just doing a few things differently. But as I look back, as I begin to see the transformation from the end to the beginning, everything was changing. Everything was changing. And that's what this does for us. It produces a change of heart. It produces a change of mind. This isn't about becoming adapted to a program called Cocaine Anonymous. You see, for so long, I became so dependent upon Cocaine Anonymous meetings, those 12 steps, and my sponsor, that if I wasn't going to meetings, if I wasn't writing a 4-step, and if I wasn't calling my sponsor, I was empty. I was empty. I got to a place in my sobriety where I began to see that I went from an unhealthy dependence on chemical to an unhealthy dependence on things outside of me. And that's where it promoted all my poor relationships. It's kind of hard not to get into a relationship when my fix is external. Have you ever heard this? You can't fix an internal problem with an external solution. Well, I came to Cocaine Anonymous, and I began to use an external fix to treat an internal problem. Because how many times did I take the steps and leave out step 2, 6, and 7? Because of my prejudice towards this idea of a power greater than myself, I thought somewhere along the way I could make up for it. Because I didn't want to take a look at this idea called God based on what my folk had pushed on me, based on my experience in so-called church, based on the hate that I had towards organized religion. I sort of thought maybe if I just do 3, 4, 5, 8, and 9, and then just try to help somebody, that I could make up for this idea of God. And that's where when I left 2 and 6 and 7 out, that I started to become dependent on meetings. They become my God. And I started to become dependent on my sponsor. And they become my God. And so when I wasn't in contact with any of these 3, something happened to me the day that I couldn't get him on the phone. I had no car, I had no way to get to a meeting, and I was sitting in my room, and I was a couple years sober, and I was looking back and had nothing ever changed in my life except the fact that I wasn't doing cocaine. And I wanted to die at a few years sober, empty. And you know, my life began to change that day when I began to iron out this prejudice I had towards the idea of a power greater than myself. And so what I hope today is that we don't get caught up in talking so much about the existence of a God that we do to allow him to display his glory through us. Because the problem is we get too busy talking about God more than we talk to him. And when we don't talk to him, therefore there's nothing happening in us. Therefore our life doesn't display everything I've been talking about. So if I'm walking around talking about a bunch of good stuff, but my life doesn't back it up, it gives nobody hope. So what I began to realize is this existence of God, this belief I have in God, wasn't enough to bring about the psychic change that I absolutely had to have in order to do what Bill Wilson says in his opinion, or actually William Silkworth, the doctor, says in his opinion, and Bill Wilson found in his beginning of his journey that the very thing he did before he knew everything we got. See, this is what I love about Bill Wilson's story in the literature is what y'all are experiencing they didn't have. This idea of Bill Wilson's 3rd treatment facility, you heard Hank say last night, he'd been through many treatment facilities. Are there anybody in here today that can say, I've been through many treatment facilities? Well, Bill Wilson was facing his 3rd treatment facility, and he had nothing to do or no idea of the problem. He had no idea really of the solution, but what he found is when he came up with some ideas and he began to present it to somebody else, he began to have a desire not to want to drink. You see, and the cool thing, I look back on my life and I see all the wrong I did have become the greatest asset in my recovery. So if you're sitting in here tonight and you're really feeling like you're defined by wrongs you've done, it's imperative that you realize that the wrongs you've done are just a catalyst to what's going to happen. Because how can you ever teach someone how to do it right when you ain't done it wrong? Right? Like somebody hung the 12 steps on the wall, but they forgot to put the instructions with them. And so we come in here, hey listen, do you realize that these are not a set of rules? These are not a set of regulations. Do you realize we are people who cannot live up to a set of rules, that we cannot live up to a set of regulations? But do you realize how religion and organized religion has ruined us? Because we set a standard for people that we know they can't meet, therefore bringing up more guilt and shame in them, therefore destroying any opportunity they ever have to experience this thing called recovery. You see, how many times do we get at 30, 60, and 90 days, we begin to have this spiritual awakening, and the day our sponsee comes in, we get mad at them because they ain't doing what we doing at 90 days at one day. We start holding the steps over their head like a rule book. Instead of learning that our only aim is to be helpful, that in the beginning it isn't handing them a book and telling them to read it being the first suggestion. There's actually 4 or 5 pages up until page 95 and working with others that gets to help you to realize that it's about relationship. This ain't about pulling in converts. We're not trying to convert people to Cocaine Anonymous. We're trying to be a display of a way that absolutely works. And so when we meet these folks, you see, I'm so used to the treatment facility outlook. And I think a lot of people may be treatment facility prospects, meaning it sort of ruins your effectiveness in one-on-one Cocaine Anonymous, because Cocaine Anonymous is not treatment. What we do in treatment is not what we do in Cocaine Anonymous. You see, you don't walk up to somebody that you don't know and tell them that they need to read the book. Because that's why most people are in Cocaine Anonymous today saying just don't drink and go to meetings, because nobody qualified them because they were too busy wanting them to know what they did instead of seeing if they needed to be here. Surely the traditions state that the only requirement is a desire not to use and drink, correct? But do you know this God-given time that we have in the beginning? This God-given time, do you realize that that time is for the people who have been there a lot longer to utilize it as our gift back to Him so that we can grab these people with a vision? Was you hopeless when you got here? Broken? Had not a lick of hope? You want to tell you the best thing that ever happened to me when I walked into the rooms of Cocaine Anonymous? It wasn't a man saying, here's a book, you need to read it. It was a man saying, here's a pack of crackers and a soda, I love you. Boy, did that arouse some things in me in the beginning. I thought, I'm in the wrong place. Well, think about it. Let's really take this deal called recovery in reality form. Meaning, let's never get so spiritually minded that we're no earthly good. And let's always remember that our aim is to work with other alcoholics on a level of one-on-one. That I pray every day that no matter how many doors you open, God, for me to do this, that I realize this ain't my recovery. That the more I become somebody, I'm speaking at all these great conventions, people are loving what I hear, but I'm absolutely replacing this as what began this program years ago. This idea of an altruistic movement that people started to get on fire about in the beginning, which was one alcoholic sharing his experience, strength, and hope with another alcoholic. Without this, this is no more. Though these conferences are great, and we do this to get people excited, without personal recovery, the unity of the group dies. So each person in here has a purpose and a responsibility to fit themselves daily so that they can be used to do it for another. Like when I begin to realize I'm not taking these 12 steps to get better so that I can enjoy a life that's beyond my imagination. When I begin to realize that God is molding me through these steps so that I could be a conduit of His message to another sick and suffering alcoholic, my life changed. Because no more was the meeting that I needed to make not important anymore. It was very important for me to be there when I began to realize that the things happening in me wasn't because I can live a glamorous life. It was so that I could go put myself in a position like the man did for me when I came. Have you ever noticed that when all other activities fail, nothing will so much ensure your immunity from cocaine use than intensive work with other cocaine addicts? Have you ever realized no matter what day you're having, when you put yourself in an environment of people like-minded, like purpose-driven, and you begin to share things that has been happening in your life, that something happens at that moment, you're not thinking about how bad your day is? Have you ever noticed that? See, that goes, this third step, man, I can't go all out into left field because we'll be here for 18 hours. But this idea of being able to make rational decisions, like the whole 12-step process is literally clearly around getting back to making good decisions. This whole thing is orchestrated by good decision making. How many people in here would like to say, I'd like to be successful? Are there anybody in here that would just simply like to be successful? Now, obviously success today means a lot more than it did before we got here. To some of us, success was riding around in a car that the rims cost more than the car. That was success, right? Or, for me, I had a nice stereo system that cost more than the car, right? I remember a time that I knew this dope dealer, and I would go to him and see, we like to do it in bunches. Like you don't withdraw 600 when you're going to smoke crack. You withdraw it 100 at a time because your intentions were I'm only going to do 100, and then you end up doing 6 more deposits, right? Well, that's what I did. I just would sell my stuff, but one at a time. Until eventually, after I sold everything inside the car, I just said, man, you might as well take the car, right? Anybody with me? Hey, because listen, this is some good news for some people, because if you're here and you've quit drinking and using, and you've been quit for a long time and your life has gotten better, like you might be in the wrong place. Like people would say, you shouldn't say that. Yes, I should. Because why would you want someone to go to a place where they can't get their best help from? I don't want people sitting in Cocaine Anonymous that can't benefit from them. It's not because I don't want them here. It's because as a person who genuinely has the best interests of other people's well-being, wouldn't you think a cancer patient deserves the best physician possible? Well, don't you think we as Cocaine Anonymous and cocaine addicts deserve the best possible means of solution? Well, there's some people that sometimes weasel in here that simply have a drug problem. They have a cocaine problem. And when they get separated from cocaine, their life gets better. And they never drink and use again. But for me, my life got better for a little bit externally. But in a matter of a day, a week, or a month, I was wanting to die. My life was worse after you took cocaine away from me. Can anybody relate? You might be in the right place then. Well, you wonder why I say these illustrations. Well, the good thing about Cocaine Anonymous is identification. You see, AA is great. NA is great. All these other fellowships are great. But see, the thing about Cocaine Anonymous is if you're a crack addict, if you're a cocaine addict, you can come in here and you can find a level of identification. Because I know for me, until I thought that you had something I wanted, or if, let me say this, until I felt like you'd been where I've been, I didn't listen to nothing you said. You see, I sat in AA for a long time, and they said, well, Bradley, it's the same thing, just substitute alcohol for cocaine. It's not that easy. Because I can hear what you did when you were drinking liquor, but you have no idea what it was like when you had to do whatever it took to get a hit of crack cocaine. You see, the book is clear, and there is a solution that we, and I was reading this morning, that I want you guys to understand something about your life. Because I'm all about pulling the best out in somebody, and I'm all about you guys seeing something. Because I think somebody in here today doesn't see their experience as being useful. They actually see their experience as being the very thing that's going to kill them. They can't see past their mistakes. They can't see past their history. They think their history dictates their destiny. But I want you clearly to know today that your past doesn't determine who you are. And though we can get great advice from pastors and ministers and other people doing this deal, did you know your drinking experience and your cocaine experience is very unique and can be used and help when nobody else can? You've got to realize that your purpose of what you did has brought you to a place that's going to equip you so that God can use that purpose to blow people's minds. And I can't share enough about how what I'm doing here, I sat there 9 years ago and thought I could never do it. And there's somebody in here today that don't think that they could ever be effective and do what I'm doing, do what Hank's doing, do what Michael Reardon's doing. But no, that's why you're here. It's so that you can begin to undergo this change of heart that we're going to talk about today, and you can begin to use your past that you thought was going to be the end of you to allow it to be turned around to be your greatest asset. Did you know that your dark past, your painful past is the greatest asset that you have? It is absolutely vital to the families and the addicts still suffering. Still suffering. So I want to oppose something today for you to give you a better understanding of these 12 steps. But I want to sort of take a twist on it, and I want to start in the middle of the book on page 95. If you got your book, and we can turn to page 95, I would like to start here. Now, I know a lot of people think that recovery begins in step 1, but I would like to beg to differ just a little bit. Because in the foreword to the 3rd edition, now I'm going to be using some of this out of the book, and we're not going to turn there because we have, the time is limited, okay? But I'm going to use some of the things from the book, and then we're going to pinpoint some things together out of the book. But I want you guys to understand something. That in the foreword to the 3rd edition, the last paragraph, it says, somewhere in the world, recovery begins when one cocaine addict shares his experience, strength, and hope with another cocaine addict. Now, I used to think when I sat down with you and I share my experience, strength, and hope, recovery begins in my life. Well, truthfully, it isn't that it begins in my life. It's actually that it begins in your life. But you see, this is the kicker. Recovery can't begin with one cocaine addict talking to a man who don't think he's a cocaine addict. It actually says recovery begins when one cocaine addict shares his experience, strength, and hope with another cocaine addict. So therefore, if there's no understanding in their heart of what that means, recovery can't begin in his life. Because if you take decisions based on half-truth, you get half measures, which leaves you what? Nothing. See, for so long I thought I took step one. I'm taking step one. Bradley, you're taking step one. Get up and take step one. Well, I began to take step one and I never got nowhere. When I began to understand I was step one and that the literature actually gave meaning to my struggle, then I actually was brought to step two and understanding why I need a power greater than myself. So page 95. Are we at page 95? Can you read the title of this chapter 7? It's called what? Working with others. It's imperative that we go ahead and get this clear. How many people in here have 30 days or less? Just raise your hands real high. And that's actually, I was talking to somebody last night. I said, I would trade my years for 30 days in a minute. You don't understand that, do you? Because where you're at, your goal is to be where I'm at, right? But you would be wondering at 9 years, why would my goal want to be where you're at? Because where much is asked, much is given. And where much is given, there's a lot of responsibility. And you don't want the responsibility that's been charged on my life because it would crumble you. See, the reason why I want what you've got is because you've got something working in your life you can't see. And it's doing for you what you could never do for yourself. And truthfully, the only worry that you have is what's in you. You see, that responsibility, that open door in the beginning is such a precious gift. That desperation, that's a gift. And how many times at 9 years or 8 years or however many years, 3, we lose it, don't we? We seeing these newcomers come in desperate not to want to die, and we walk around just existing. Getting caught up in a rhetoric, getting caught up in a routine of Cocaine Anonymous. I'm making meetings. I'm talking to other people. Did you know that whatever you consider the enemy, devil, enemy, I don't know what you consider, but understand the force that's working for you, there is a force working against you. I mean, you can call it a disease, but it's working against you. And so how many times you take a couple steps forward, does it feel like you've taken 8 back? Right? Did you know that this force that works against you absolutely loves somebody on routine? Loves somebody that gets up and at 8 o'clock they do on awakening. He loves this because the minute he can get you missing at 8 o'clock on awakening, he got you where he wants you because your day is based on your routine and not actually a spirit of the universe living in you. Right? I'm guilty. See, we get caught up in the things that come with recovery. Did you know that when you stay sober, good things happen? Did you know that? Let me share this with you. This might blow some of y'all's mind. But when I thought these steps gave me a relationship with God, I failed miserably. Because we talked about rules, didn't we? We talked about not being able to live up to certain standards. So if these were standards to live by that gave me a relationship with God, I'm in big trouble. And how it works is lying by saying none of us have been able to live up to anything like perfect adherence to these principles. So therefore, if none of us have been able to live up to this, and we fail miserably, then we're in big trouble if we picture this pathway as something that gives us a relationship with God. Second, if I think that these 12 steps make me right with God based on what I do, when I fail miserably like How It Works says, because if you've ever read Bill Wilson's story, he was clear to let you know that there are certain low spots and trials ahead, didn't he? That you must grow through self-sacrifice and intensive work with others. Didn't he say that? Because there's certain low spots and trials ahead. Isn't that right? Isn't that what he says? So if this stuff right here makes me right with God, then what happens on those days when I let up on the spiritual program of action and rest on my laurels? Then I begin to feel like at 2 years, the God that had brought me to where I'm at don't want nothing to do with what I'm doing today because I didn't do what he told me to yesterday. Somebody follow me because somebody's starting to get some hope because their dependence and what's been giving them hope is based on what they're doing. But I don't know about y'all, but what I thought is what I did. Anybody with me? What you think is what you do. And what I thought was what I did. So the moment I thought my performance was dictated on what God did to me was the day that I didn't do what I thought he would want me to. And the day is when I started to lose my identity that I began to get the first couple months of who God said I was. You see, if what we think we do, then what I thought is why I smoke crack. And why I smoke crack is why I'm here. So if what I think and what I do gets me here, then how in the world can I serve a God or a power greater than myself that what I do dictates what He does? Hey, listen, I began to understand over studying this big book for years, I beg God. Now, I hope nobody's offended when I talk about God, because the only first two steps talk about a power greater than ourselves. Once we iron that out, Bill Wilson's clear that there isn't but one, and His name, and it's God. For there is one. Page 47, second paragraph, last sentence, there's one. His name is God. Amen. The good news for you guys is you choose your own conception. See, we get into this business of creating God. The book doesn't create a God. It just simply allows you the opportunity to have your own conception of God. However inadequate was all we needed to begin this journey. So when I speak of God, I speak of my own conception. Just as freely as you guys speak of God, you speak of your conception. I clearly speak of a power that is created me and is in work through me, and is clearly is for y'all too. So, are y'all on page 95? See, the good idea, the great thing about these steps and the great thing about the ones who wrote this program is they understood us. And they wrote literature that would meet us where we were. Because it's imperative that we realize no matter how much God blesses us, those blessings don't help the man that's getting here in 30 days. See, where I'm at today don't give people hope where they're at. What gives them hope is when I can get off my pedestal and I can get on their level. You see, because the great news for you is where I'm at in my life, you don't have to be. And see, this idea I have towards God doesn't have to be your idea, nor do you even have to believe it in the beginning. See, that's the thing that I've begun to realize, is that the solution that we talk about is the very thing that keeps all of us in prison. Our perception of God, our perception of a power greater than ourselves, is the very thing that keeps us in prison. We don't want to look at this idea, because Bill Wilson is clear that this prejudice we have, you see, page 47 talks about the instruction of the second step, but 44 through 46 talk about this thing called prejudice. This idea that we have towards this power and how we got to find some way of ironing it out. And do you know the best way to iron that out? Understanding step one. Did you know that someone doesn't have to believe in God, nor do you even have to say His name in order for them to begin recovery when you start getting on their level and giving them hope about why they're here? There's something about understanding why I'm here that dictates why I got to do what you're doing. But it's kind of hard for you to convince me that what you're living by, I need to, and I'm not really sure why I'm here. Right? So aren't we really quick to talk to people about this idea of God more than we are why they're here? Because I don't know about y'all, but my recovery began when I began to go from here to here, why I was actually here. How many people are here tonight, or when they got here thought they were here because of cocaine use? I'm here because of cocaine use. Page 95, the first full paragraph. I want to read this, and I want to say this up until this point. By this point, you've connected with these folks, okay? You've built relationships. You've went up to them, offered them an ear. Who would have thought that just sitting down and listening and not saying nothing would give more hope than anything I could ever say? When you give somebody your time, hey, listen, are we people who are wired to give time to people to sit down and listen, or are we wired to take our time to utilize it to benefit us? We're wired to use our time to benefit us, ain't we? So when people start seeing and realizing you are where they come from, and then they're thinking, why is he giving his time to help me? You start shattering this thing called fear in them. And so up until this point, we've engaged in relationship with these folks. We've offered them a cup of coffee. We've shook their hand. Okay, we've got down and we begin to find out some things about them. Do you know why we find out things about them? Do you know why we take time to build relationships instead of pushing this on their head like this? I can do that to you, can I? Do you know why we don't beat people up in this book? Do you know why recovery can begin in your life without it? Do you know that hope should be given without them ever having to see this? Because when you begin to build relationship and they begin to win confidence to think you've been where they've been, guess what happens? You can start turning the tables around to approach them the way you would have wanted to be approached if you were in their shoes. So how arrogant of me to come up and consider a man that may hate God for me to approach him with God. How arrogant of me to think that where I'm at could ever reach a man in the mire pits of alcoholism and cocaine addiction and the death that's gripped him. But through that one-on-one and through giving my God-given gift called time to them, they began to find some confidence in me that I might know a little bit about what I'm talking about. Until such an understanding is made, the book says little or nothing can be accomplished. This is about relationship. This ain't about a set of rule books. This ain't about you need to do what I'm telling you to do. This is about relationship. And if I claim to have this relationship with God, then it's imperative that you see it through the relationship I'm building with others. And if you see somebody talking more about his existence than you do them living it out, then you probably want to steer clear of them. What did Bill Wilson say very brilliantly? That this deal is not a theory. The spiritual life is not a theory. We must live it. And it's in our living do people grasp hope because they see where we come from. They're at that place now, and they start to wonder what it is we've done to get where they're at. So page 95, the third full paragraph says, at this point, if he is interested, right? If he's not interested, how would you know if you ain't built relationship? He's got to be interested. The way you know he's interested is he begins to talk to you. You know, we are people who don't mingle well, aren't we? Right? Like we're fragile individuals. Like we come in here scared to death, don't we? Completely broken, and we are fear-driven. So let me ask you this. If it was really up to the sponsee to pursue the sponsor, there wouldn't be no fellowship. If we ain't got recovered cocaine addicts purposely driven, then how are these sponsees ever going to make it to where we at? Because they're going to fall through the cracks out if you expect them to come to you. Well, I don't have a sponsee because they ain't nobody asked me. Well, you're the one with the tools, not them. Won't you go ask them? Right? We're turning the tables. We're approaching others as we wanted to be approached. I remember my first day, I was scared to death. I needed somebody to come to me. I needed somebody to pay me attention. Sorry. Right? Am I talking to somebody tonight? I need to know you're with me here. Because this is good stuff. This is what the big book teaches us. On the level of, if I sat up here and read this, y'all would be asleep. But taking practical experience and sharing it gives what? Hope. And when you get hope, guess what that is? Your strength. Experience, strength, and hope. This is what we do. We don't sit up here and read verbatim out of a book so that you fall asleep. We take our experience and we put it with it so that it has power. I read this book for many a days and threw it across the room many a days because I had no clue what it meant. I sat in treatment for many a days throwing it and crying because I actually didn't want to die, but I wanted to know what it said. I know a woman one time that was on a date with a man. Actually, she had started to read a book. She loved reading books, right? And she put it down and she just couldn't get into it. You ever done that? Just can't get into it. Some days you can read 100 books, some days you just can't read one. She put it down and she had a phone call with a friend that said, hey, listen, I know you ain't been on a date. I want to hook you up with somebody. Anybody been on a blind date? And so she hooked him up with a blind date and she went out and she began to conversate with this man and she began to find out he was an author. And she just got the tickled about what he did and what he wrote. And so after she left, she went back home and she picked that book up and she realized that book that she was reading, he was the author. You see, until you meet the author, you ain't going to want to read the book. And so we got to stop expecting to get out of this thing here what we want without doing the work to get it. We are result-prone people. We want results without doing the work, don't we? So it's important that we don't get discouraged in the beginning when I don't have what the next man has, when I don't know what this book is saying. It's imperative that I just follow instructions. That's why we have sponsorship. That's why we have people ahead of us that's blazed the path, not so that we know what they do, is so that when the desperation that's given to us, that is a gift, kicks in, we are willing to go to any lengths. Did you know that as we read here, the only requirement that we must have coming in that nobody in here can give you is a desire to seek God? It says, if he is interested, ask him to read this book in the interval. After doing so, he must determine for himself whether or not he wants to go on. He says, if he is to find God, the desire must come from within. They ain't no amount of me pushing you into this that could ever give you that. But you want me to tell you something that can? A lot of cocaine use. A lot of pain. Pain is the only thing that ever gave me what I needed in order to move forward. Ain't that right? So what we're realizing here is through building relationships with these people in the Fellowship of Cocaine Anonymous, is that we're able to get to a point where we're capable of presenting them something that has changed our life. It goes on to say that after this point, we begin to talk about step one, okay? Now in treatment, obviously you can go straight up to them and blast them. But in Cocaine Anonymous, we don't do that. Because the spirit what? Attracts. The ego what? Promotes. Did you realize that the spirit attracts and the ego promotes? The person that speaks more about God than he does live for him, that's ego. But the one who knows this truth that just wants to walk around with the book says he's a man that has an answer that his whole deportment shouts it, that's called attraction. And you can't miss them. Most of the time they'll be walking around with this. And you'll want everything they got. How many times have you heard this? You need to find a sponsor that's got everything you want. Well, I don't know about y'all, but when I got here, I wanted to smoke crack. So I'm not sure that you should be picking sponsors based on what they got that you want, okay? That you don't need to be picking sponsors based on what you want, okay? But it's imperative that you begin to search out people that have what they want, that look content with their life. Because those are things that you feel you could never live up to based on your failure, because your failures at this point determine your future. Therefore, if you begin to see hope in what people have, that they've been where you've been, you begin to pursue the coattails of the ones who have what they want. Skip over to page 97. 96, excuse me. It says the first full paragraph, actually the second full paragraph, says, suppose we are now making our second visit to a man. So we've built relationship, right? We've engaged in conversation. We've built relationship. We've engaged in conversation. Maybe we've picked up the phone just to call them and say, hey, I've been thinking about you, hadn't seen you. Did you know that's good? Give them a phone list, they'll call you. Psh, you better get their phone number and start calling them. Now, I don't say don't pass around phone numbers, and hey, some people use it, but I began to realize I need to get their number because they ain't calling me. It's just been my experience. Hey, you talk about, oh, I'm on the firing lines. I'm at a meeting every night. That ain't the firing line. Those meetings are a place for you to go and give hope. And if you've been sober 6 months, 9 months to a year, and you're still going to meetings to find serenity, you're in trouble. You're in trouble. Because somewhere along the way, you've missed the whole mark. These meetings were never intended to go and get anything from it after we've had a spiritual awakening. It's always been to go and give back. Because imagine if we were all going to meetings to get something. We wouldn't have a lick of hope, would we? It says, suppose you are now making your second visit to a man. He has read this volume. You've asked him to read the book. You've built relationship with him. He seems interested, right? So you say, hey, here's a book that has helped me and I would like for you to read it. He's interested, he's going to read it. You know how you know he's interested and he's going to read it? Because the next page says, suppose you're making your second visit to a man and he has read this volume. Hey, do you realize this big book is brilliantly written? If you have a question, 9 times out of 10, if you read the next sentence, it'll answer it. You ever read something, got interested, picked up the phone and called your sponsor, and he told you to read the next sentence and it answered your question? He says he is prepared to go through with the 12 steps of the program of recovery. Having had this experience yourself, you can give him much practical advice. Let him know you are available if he wishes to make a decision and tell his story, but do not insist upon it if he prefers to consult someone else. That's a very good thing for us to realize. Just because you pursued relationship, just because he's interested and you've gave him a book, don't mean you're his sponsor. We get our feelings hurt that way. We set ourselves up for failure when thinking all the things I'm doing is helping him, when truly that I might just been an instrument to point him towards the one who could really help him. That's why this ain't about personality. This is strictly about business. This is about assignment. We're on assignment, and it ain't about us. It's just about being in the right place at the right time, doing what it is at that point that we're supposed to, and then we keep moving. Because any setbacks keep us from our assignment. If you're in AA, UNCA, you're taking these 12 steps, you're sponsoring women, you're on assignment, and you're on purpose. And so we can't afford setbacks and starting to put dependence on these people or them putting it on us. We can't afford that. We have to take all this off of us and realize we're simply vessels and instruments that the power that is working in us uses us to help others, okay? Because if identification is vital, it's imperative that we get put with the people that can pull us with a vision, right? How many times have you been appointed a sponsor? I'm not sure how well that works. Because if you put me with someone I can't identify with, then I'm not going to have the best chances of recovering, am I? Oh, God works everything out. Hey, listen, we put too much pressure on this idea of God. We think God's going to do all this stuff for us that we can do for ourselves. He ain't going to do for us what we can do for ourselves. We steady thinking God's going to do this, God's going to do that. Why are you putting more pressure on Him? God got you here. Now it's time for you to get the tools and start doing something. Right? But we fall victim to this idea of God that we have, that He's going to bring us here, He's going to do it for us, He's going to do this. He ain't. He ain't. He ain't about doing the possible. God don't get glory for doing possible. He only gets it from the impossible, and He jerked you out of a gutter. He got glory for that. That's why we got sponsorship and people walking with purpose who build relationships, who give you a big book, who begin to take you through these steps, because guess what? That's what we can do. The result of it is what God can do. He keeps you sober. So suppose you're making your second visit. He's prepared to go through with these steps. Do we take him through the steps at this point? Well, the book goes on to say that if we do, then later on, if they get drunk, they'll come back and blame us, that we rushed them. Don't they do that? Man, you rushed me to that. This is the whole purpose. If you go on to read, and we're going to push along here, because I don't even know what time it is, but we're going to push along here. But understand the purpose of what I'm doing is to help you guys to understand that what we're standing on as recovered alcoholics. You see, every great teacher, when he teaches, he uses analogies. There's some really great teachers that we've been known about. If you look back in history, there's great teachers. And when people would teach, they would use analogies. Well, Bill Wilson was a great teacher. And when he wrote this book, he used analogies. And one of the analogies that I see through the whole book is that he talks about building an archway through which we pass to freedom. And what I'm realizing is that when I talk about the foundation that I'm standing on, it's important that we begin to allow the foundation that others are standing on to be unshakable. And the way we do that is by sticking to the literature. It ain't going around and thinking I know what's best. It ain't about hurrying them through the steps. You know, there's some things I learned in early Cocaine Anonymous that really ruined me. Hurry them on through the steps, they're going to die. Well, hey, that ain't none of my business. And when I start taking business for people dying, then I got to start taking business for people making it. And when I take people for people making it, I got to take credit for people getting drunk. And I don't want that on my shoulders. The book is clear on page 132 that the minute I start burdening the whole shoulder of the next man, guess who falls? Me. If you go on to page 97, it says, never avoid these responsibilities. Hey, listen, this working with others is talking about what I'm doing with the new person. See, we get caught up in thinking this is instruction for me. This should be a display of what it looks like me working with you. And you see, it's just like a telemarketer calling. If they call, they start saying a lot of good things first, don't they? You got a 3-night, 3-day vacation on the water, don't they? And you steady listening. At first you heard the automated, you was about to hang up, and then you started hearing them talking about water and beach and 3 nights and everything, right? You still hanging on. The minute he starts talking about money, what y'all do? Why would we take a newcomer completely through the steps right when we meet them, that then when they fall they can blame us? Because truthfully, it's imperative that you let it all out in the beginning so that they'll know when the time comes, this is why I told you this in the beginning, because it's a requirement. And therefore you have no excuse now why you failed, except for the fact that there's something in your life that you're unwilling to let go of. You never want to get to a place where you hurry these people through so that they can point the finger back on you. Because if you take the time and show them what the book says, they can't complain. You take every excuse they ever had. And when you take away an alcoholic and cocaine addict's excuse, they have to look at the truth. Never avoid these responsibilities, but make sure that you are doing the right thing if you assume them. Helping others is the foundation stone of your recovery. Now think about it. In the beginning, when you read this, helping others is the foundation stone, and you're sitting here with a day, a week, or a month, you're thinking, how in the world, if what I'm supposed to be standing on is unshakable and it's helping other people, what do I have to offer? So how can helping others be the very thing I'm standing on? Well, that's a good idea because Bill Wilson and Ebby Thatcher, they share it very brilliantly in page 12. Let's turn to 12 real quick. It says, my friend suggested. Now understand at this point, Ebby Thatcher's coming just to share some good things with him. Something's happened in him. And he's thinking about some people he used to grow up with, right, that was struggling. So he's just excited, right? See, what we need to stop doing in CA is we need to stop being what they call dream stealers. Just because you got 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 3 years, 4 years, and you know that what they're doing may not particularly be on the mark, it's imperative that you don't use this book as a blanket to take away the fire. You need to use it as a fan to take it and ignite it. There's a way and a how of, it ain't the matter of giving, it's when and how. And so Ebby Thatcher probably had not a lick of tact or common sense with his approach to Bill Wilson, but look what it did. You see, there we go, that ego thing again, thinking we know what's best for these people. When we steady taking people through the 12 steps, sponsors taking people through the steps, it ain't your place to take them through the steps. It's their place to take you through it. So when they get to the 12th step, they won't be crippled on how not to do it or how to do it because you did it for them. It says, having had the experience yourself, you can give them much practical advice. It didn't say you could do it for them. So it's really their place to take you through the steps that when they have questions, the practical advice you can give it. That way, when they get to their 12 steps, they have no excuse of why they can't do this for themselves. It says, my friend suggested that then seemed a novel idea. He said, why don't you choose your own conception of God? That statement hit me hard. It melted the icy intellectual mountain in whose shadows I had lived and shivered many years. I stood in the moonlight at last. It was only a matter of believing. It was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing more was required of me to make my beginning. I saw that growth could start from that point. Upon a foundation of complete willingness, I might build what I saw in my friend. Would I have it? Of course I would. Do you realize that this foundation stone of our recovery is a willingness based on the approach you gave them because your approach was such a sane, common, and friendly and full of human understanding approach that they begin to be less fearful and more hopeful that what you did for them that maybe they could do for themselves. Isn't that what working with others says? If our approach was sane, something, and full of human understanding, perhaps when we leave we have a friend. You see, we got to stop looking at these people as sick people. And we got to stop looking at sick friends. And we got to approach them as a friend would approach another friend. And you see, through this literature and through giving them the best chance they have to recover, when we approach them, they begin to build their foundation on complete willingness to believe that what he's seen happened in you can begin to happen in him. Because you got to realize at this point, Ebby Thatcher had no information about what was wrong with him. He just had everything about what happened to him. He had this thing called leading with the chin. Meaning he had the idea that God or whatever this religion was going in him, but he had no clue of why. Therefore, leading him back to a drunk eventually. So this is what I want to make paramount today. This is why I come. I've did everything that I've done up until this point to make this last so many minutes paramount. To understand that at this point, our fellowship was based on a willingness. But let me tell you something. Dr. Silkworth and his information on the medical aspect of this disease and Carl Jung and his importance of putting in what he did is why we're together today. Do you understand that what holds us together, one part that holds us together is our common peril of how it was when we were out there? The big book uses this shipwreck idea of being out on the sea and shipwrecked. Hey, let me tell you something. If you out on a ship and you in the sea and the man standing on the boat's black, guess what? His color ain't going to matter. But we come in here and we want to act like we need to be with this black man or this white man because color matters. Let me tell you something. When there's desperation, color don't matter. Guess what? I want him to throw me that thing, don't you? Please throw me that life preserver. I don't care if you're white, you're black, you're a woman or a man. Please. See, this is one part of the element that holds us together. But in and of itself cannot hold us together as we're joined today. And what I'm about to share with you is the catalyst. It is the step that we must take 100% into our hearts. Because I'm going to tell you something. Without it, I'm not going to say you're going to use cocaine again. But you're not going to experience the fullness of walking on a highway holding hands in hand with the Spirit of the universe. Because there's something about knowing I ain't a bad person. I'm a sick man trying to get well. I'm not a bad man trying to get good. I'm a sick man trying to get well. There's something about understanding my predicament. Because let me tell you something. The problem defines the solution. A good understanding of the problem will define the solution. So think about this. And I'm going to probably be a little longer than we talked about, so I just wanted to say that. I'm sorry. And it won't be much longer, but I want to hit this. Are y'all with me still? Because, hey, listen, my prayer, listen, I realize this, that after being sober for 9 years, the thing that I've left out the most, which is prayer, has become the most vital part of my recovery. If you ever watch these people that do workshops and do speakers, all these people that you see that you're like Chris Raymer, my God, like these people, like if you'll go back to their beginning of their workshops from 5 and 6 years ago, 8, 9 years ago, start listening to them today. And you'll start understanding how much more they put on 10, 11, and 12. How much more they begin to understand the power of meditation and prayer. Because how dare me come into a room of y'all and speak to you about something good if I can't pray for you? You see, this ain't the work. You see, and prayer is not a preparation to the work. Prayer is the work. My prayer is that God molded your hearts to be able to take this, not to leave emotionally driven, but to leave with some purpose and saying, I'm going back to my respected homes, my occupations, and I'm going to demonstrate this. We got enough emotionally driven people that we only get excited when our emotions get high enough. That ain't what it's about. This is about doing it regardless of how I feel. So we want to be powerful, purpose-driven cocaine addicts, recovered cocaine addicts, that when we leave here, we want to go back and share what I've learned so that others' life can be changed and so that they can go and share. So think about this. When we get here, the only understanding of the problem we have is based on what drugs and alcohol did to us physically. You sat in a meeting your first day and you've already took the steps, ain't you? We admitted we were powerless. What do we say? We admitted we were powerless, didn't we? Yep, check. But let's go back to our mindsets that day. Why are we powerless? At that day. Now, I don't need no gurus in here. I need some honesty from the heart. You know, we get molded by what we know, but this ain't about what we know. This is about being true to ourselves. You know, the honesty that rigorously is dependent upon recovery is not with you. This is going to change somebody's life tonight. You've gotten caught up in being willing to be honest in 4 and 5. You've actually professionalized writing an inventory and being honest. That ain't the honesty that it's talking about. Because just because you're going back in 4 and 5 admitting something that's the same but with a different name, you ain't being honest with yourself. So the rigorous honesty it's talking about is to thine own self be true. But we can manipulate this deal and go back in 4 and 5 and feel better about doing what I just admitted is objectionable in 6 and 7, just so I could keep doing it. But that's a whole other workshop right there. We admitted we were powerless, check. So at that moment, what are we really saying? The only information we know at that point is once I start smoking crack, I can't stop. Ain't it? We admitted we were powerless. The reason why we say check is based on the level of what it did to us physically, right? Drugs is the problem. So if we take our little problem and solution thing and we type in drugs, and if the problem defines the solution, then if the problem is drugs, then what is the solution? Don't do them. Don't use. And so therefore, most of our recovery, when we don't get a sponsor and we don't take the steps, most of our decision, though you have a gift of desperation, though you don't want to die, because there are people falling in the cracks of Cocaine Anonymous every day because we ain't got enough purpose-driven people that are willing to study that book and take their time and teach them. I'm going to go ahead and say it today. I watch it all the time. And I don't say that arrogantly. I say it as a way that I hope you have a response today, that you look at what you ain't been doing and you get off your tails and start doing something differently. Because if you got people falling at the crack side, you can't blame it on they wasn't willing. Especially if you didn't give them your time. Because they're operating off a truth that is no truth, and they're ending up with no results. Because if they think their problem's drugs, what they think they do, their actions are dictated on not using. So every day they're steady going about and trying not to use. What do we say because we don't want to give them their time? Just keep coming back. Meated makers make it. Put the plug in the jug. The dope can't hurt you if it stays in the dealer's pocket. That's what we tell them. And that information would be absolutely correct if this was the only problem. If the only problem was physically what alcohol and drugs did to us, those things would be solutions. But I want to say this in the most loving and spiritual manner that I possibly can say it, is that those things are great advice on one-on-one in the beginning, but it's imperative that we share how it isn't a solution. Because just not drinking in the beginning, we must do that, because it takes a little bit of willingness from us to not pick up. But it is not something I need to share in a meeting for the newcomer in the back that here's a guy over here saying, I did a thorough inventory and I got honest about it. And I had to get on my knees and ask God to remove it, and I had to make restitution to a man in a meeting saying, I just didn't drink and I didn't go to meetings and I've been sober 20 years. That carnal-minded newcomer, which one you think he's going to go with? He's going to go with the guy that ain't drinking and going to meetings. Though that is great advice, it's not a solution. And nowhere in here do I see it. And if we use it, it's imperative that we do it one-on-one and that we make sure that the person knows that this is just a simply beginning, and that if not followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things that are blocking us, we could have little or no permanent effect. So, let's understand what this is talking about. Dr. Silkworth describes it as an allergy. It says the doctor's theory that we have an allergy to alcohol interests us. Do you know why it interests us? Because when you think about allergy, you think about getting your throat swelled up, don't you? When you think about a bee allergy, you think about people who swell out in hives, right? So when we think about the word allergy, it interests us because we're thinking to ourselves, man, when I drink alcohol, I don't swell up, right? So it interests us. This theory that alcoholics and drug addicts have an allergy interests us. There's that word interest again. If he's interested, you must have been giving him your time. I'm going to kill this time thing. Hey, time is a vital gift. You know how many times you hear people say, time's money? You ever heard that statement? Time might be money, but there ain't no amount of money that's going to give you any time back. And your gift back to God is the way you use that time. And just giving your kids a little bit of money don't make up for not being in their life. That's called a great provider. We got plenty of fathers. We ain't got enough daddies. But anyway, allergy. It interests us. But let's put it in context so we can understand it. The word allergy in the context of drug use is this, if you want to write it down, an abnormal reaction to a common substance. That's simply what this means. And I'm not going to write it. But it's an abnormal reaction to a common substance. So therefore, when we begin to understand physically what drugs do to us, what does it do? Once we start, we can't stop, right? So if this is us, and we have an allergy, then we understand that we can't use, right? If you have an allergy to alcohol, which every time you drink, you can't stop, or every time you do cocaine, you can't stop, because the book says that the manifestation of this allergy is a phenomenon of craving. Do you know what the word phenomenon means? It can't be explained. Though you can't explain it, it's evident in your life what it's doing. So the manifestation of an allergy is a phenomenon of craving, which is this irresistible thought. It's a thought that says, I need another. I need another. I need another. I need another. You see, the reason why you can't stop it is because the book says this here is beyond your mental control. Just let me get you on the same level. What was it that you used? Like if I was to say, I'm going to lock you up in a house, and I'm going to lock the doors, I'm going to pad it up, and I'm going to give you whatever drug you want, what you going to pick? What about you? Crack.
Oh, God, I don't even know.
What about you, sir? Whatever you got. What about you? Heroin. Any crack addicts? Cocaine addicts? Hey, listen, I put you in this house, I board it up, I give you all the stems you need, all the cartons of cigarettes you need, and all the Bic lighters you need. Because ain't nothing like smoking crack without a Bic lighter. You go into the store to get another one, getting pulled over for simple possession, going to prison, you got $100 worth of crack at home, you're going to be in trouble, right? You had a couple Bics on you, right? Especially for my ice smokers. Anyway, don't you always love the crack addicts at first was scared to get the dope? Hey, man, I really want some crack. You think you can go get it for me? Absolutely. I'll be right back. I ain't coming back. Matter of fact, if I come back, I done threw one shoe off. I done tore my shirt off. Man, they got me. Right? I'm all like this. Man, they got me. Right? Bugging out, knowing I done smoked all his crack. Right? So I lock you up in this house, I padlock you, I give you everything you need to do the drug that you would choose to do. What's going to happen? You're going to die, ain't you? Because everybody understands the level of what drugs do to them physically. They understand once they ingest chemical, they can't stop. Everybody understands this aspect of this disease. Everybody. But like I said, if this was the only problem, then the solution would be not to use. And how many people in here have tried their whole life just not to do it? So the question is, why in the world, and if I could use you, sir, the question is not, once you start, you can't stop. Because you've known that for how long? Half your life. How old are you? 29. So 15 years? 14 and 3/4? So for 14 and 3/4, you know it's a bad idea to do drugs. Simply because of this information. Right? A lot of people say that drug addiction is a disease of denial. I beg to differ. In the beginning, it may have been a disease of denial because there was no problems attached to it. It was all fun. But there comes a point in our life where it ain't nothing but problems. And there's no doubt that there's a problem. The problem is the ignorance level of it. I've been well convinced that this disease is a disease of ignorance. That we lack knowledge of what's really wrong with us. Because you told me for 14 and a half years, you know that it's a bad idea to drink it. The question would be then, why you keep doing it? That's the question that no amount of crack you smoke and no amount of cocaine you snort and no amount of drugs you do could ever answer the question of why you do it. And that's the hope we offer here. That's the vital importance of sponsorship, big book sponsorship. Because we must have a man armed with the facts about himself and this solution in order to win the entire confidence. And a man that ain't been in your shoes but has also been over here can never help you the way that needs to be helped. So my question would be this. If you know this is a problem, then why you keep doing it? Page 24. How many times have you stopped using? And I heard your story last night, Hank. You are a professional at stopping. You are a professional at stopping using cocaine and drinking. Going to the mustard seed. You wanted to stay sober. If you'd have hooked you up to a lie detector to test those 90 days you stayed sober, it would have said you wanted to stay sober. You wasn't lying. And I know there's several people in here who have been through years of misery. And you could have hooked you up to a lie detector test and asked you, did you want to stay sober? And the truth would have been you did. You did. And though you had a period of time of sobriety, you seemed like you always went back to the very thing you said you'd never go back to. And every time it brought more horror and more guilt, the 4 horsemen you read in A Vision for You. And the more you put your self-worth just goes down the drain. So my question would be this. though we have a period of time of sobriety, the question is never about stopping because we're professionals at stopping. The biggest question is why can't we stay stopped? Why can't we stay stopped? Though grace, this idea of grace, has separated us from chemicals numerous occasions, put us in a seat like this. There's somebody tonight that think they chose to come here, but truthfully, grace put you in this seat. You were ordered here for some reason. You didn't choose. Did you say on the day you got here, I think I'll go to Cocaine Anonymous? Did you? When you were smoking crack, do you have a calendar saying, I'm going to smoke crack this day and this day, but I'm going to Cocaine Anonymous this day? So something was working outside of you, something you can't see that separated you from what was killing you, because none of us made a decision ever to not do it because we love to do it. Let's get real. We love to smoke crack. I love to smoke crack. I just didn't love the consequences. I love to get high. Come on. We get here. I didn't love to get high. We get real like boot camp highs. I don't get high. Don't be talking about drugs around me. Man, there's a time in my recovery I thought if I didn't have an allergy, I'd still smoke kind, bud. I want to be honest, man. I don't want to become so spiritual. I can't tell you this enough, that we are drug addicts and alcoholics who have a story that can help others, and we don't never want to get to a point where our story don't benefit others because we done outlived it. So think about it. Dang. I love you guys, man. Y'all don't get it. You guys don't get it. Like, I don't get this. This is it, man. This is what I've been looking for my whole life. This idea of unity, this idea of a fellowship of the Spirit, like it's here. Like what y'all been looking for, look no more. The evidence of it is when you look in the mirror every day. Because you are the evidence of that grace that's got you sitting in that chair listening to a message that from this day forward, your life ain't never going to be the same again. Ever. So the question is why we keep starting, right? So let's look at this idea of our mind. Page 24 quickly. Page 24. The fact is that most drug addicts, for reasons yet obscure, have lost the power and choice in drink. So just not drinking and going to meetings don't sound too hot now, does it? Well, if you ain't got a choice to not use, then it's probably imperative that you don't try not to do it. Like we focus all our efforts on truth we have, and all our efforts keep landing us drunk. This is why, have you ever heard this? And they will know the truth, and the truth will what? Set them free. But if you only have this truth, which is what it does to you physically, you don't know the truth. You have the half-truth, which half measures what? Nothing. This in and of itself will avail us nothing. And this is not enough truth to set you free. But these two together, brought to the right problem, will set you free. This ain't about performance. This is about right belief. You can't have right belief without the right problem. What you think you do, when you begin to understand this information, is what dictates the belief you have, dictated with the action of restoring you to sanity, which has got you on your knees in step 3, taking an action in 4, which has been the very thing that has changed your world. For reasons yet obscure, have lost the power of choice and drink. Our so-called willpower becomes practically non-existent. We're unable at certain times. There's the kicker. We're not unable at all the time. There's people who can stay sober a week, a month, a year with saying no. There's some people that's been sober 10 years saying no. Dry drunk, ain't took a lick of steps, ain't nothing changed in them. They just saying no and going to meetings. Well, if they're anything like me, their brains look like this. And there's a certain time coming. And it's imperative that we understand our predicament as cocaine addicts, that this is our mind. And that every day when we wake up, we spin it. And as long as our mind don't land on anything here, as long as it lands on here, when we get asked to do drugs and alcohol, the thought crosses our mind, we say no, because we can see the truth. It says, we are enabled at certain times to bring into our consciousness with sufficient force the memory of suffering and humiliation of even a week or a month ago. We were without defense against the first drink. So this is the question. What are we doing when we don't pick up the spiritual kit of tools? I'm talking to some of y'all that's been sober for a while. What happens when we get caught up in a routine? I'm making meetings, but I ain't doing a lick of prayer or meditation. I'm making meetings and I'm helping people off experiences I had 4 years ago. Because if I'm being honest, I ain't picked up my book in a while. You see, there ain't no way an experience 4 years ago can put a new person in a new season because it ain't a new seed. In order for it to be a new season, it has to be a new seed. And in order for it to be a new season, that means you're a farmer and you own the work daily. What happens is we're playing Russian roulette with our life. Because once cocaine addict, always cocaine addict. Now you'll have your spiritual people saying, well, God healed me. Well, good luck with that. Because I don't care how spiritual you get or how far you get from your last cocaine use. It don't matter how much you seek God transformation-wise. It ain't taking away the allergy of the body. Your body will never metabolize alcohol and cocaine the right way. The problem isn't the mind. We're all spiritually and mentally sick. The thing that separates this, the reason why we do this is because of what happens to us physically. Because the allergy of the body ensures us death. This is why we meet called Cocaine Anonymous, because we have a disease. And it separates us from normal people because when they drink, they stop. When we drink, our body opens up for more. But the problem is mixed with this mental twist, we sometimes somehow believe that we don't have the allergy along the way. And I start believing that lie that this time I can stop at one. Because the day I wake up and it spins and it lands on this part that's missing, when the thought of drinking and using comes, I don't do nothing but drink and use. Because I don't have a mental defense, because I have an unwhole mind. Step 2 says, came to believe in a power greater than ourselves that could what? Restore us to sanity. I want to clear something up. Insanity does not mean doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. That is not the definition. Tiger Woods does the same thing over and over again, doesn't he? He's what? Practicing. Is he insane? The definition of insanity is unwhole. The definition of sanity is whole. What we're trying to go from is an unwhole mind to a spiritual transformation. We become whole. And it's a daily reprieve contingent on the maintenance of our spiritual condition through work and self-sacrifice. So when we begin to understand what they call the second part of this illness, which is the mental obsession, what do we understand based on this? We can't not use. Because of an unwhole mind, there's coming a day where I'm going to use. I can't not use. Right? So if I'm starting to identify and I'm starting saying, Bradley, dang, this action that alcohol and drugs have on me is abnormal. And every time I do start, I can't stop. That is me. And matter of fact, the more you talk about this mind, and the more, no matter how much I don't want to use, the day always comes back when I do, I probably have that thing called a mental obsession. I must have an unwhole mind. You see, and when you tie these two together, and you read page 45 when it says, lack of power, that was our dilemma, then you can take that problem, put it into defines the solution, and what do you need? Power. You see, when you understand the fullness of the problem, that not only do you have a physical allergy, you have a mental illness, and these two things coupled define the actual problem, which is lack of power, then that points you directly towards what you need is power. So therefore, you ain't got to argue with somebody about an idea of God, because when they get to this predicament, which is hopeless, you ever heard that what we're trying to recover from is a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body? This is it. When a person begins to find the futility and the fatality of this disease, there's nothing less but to point them to step 2, because each step properly taken delivers you to the next. I'm not going into step 2 tonight because I feel like an understanding of this presents you why we need to understand we need a power. Think about it. Problem defines the solution. Lack of power is our dilemma. What we need? Power. I will say this in closing. Step 2 said, came to believe in a power greater than ourselves that could restore us to sanity. A belief must be accompanied by an action, or it is of no value. Just a belief in existence of God will not do anything for you. But when you take that belief and you tie it with an action of being restored to sanity, then you can make a decision. And you can get on your knees and you can follow that through with action. Are there any women in here tonight that would say, I have one hairdresser and I've been going to her forever? Somebody be honest with me. Okay. Do you have one? Do you really have one? Okay. And how did you hear about them?
Met him at a meeting.
Okay. How did you hear about yours? Okay. Through a person, through a billboard? How many would say today they have a hairdresser that particularly somebody pointed them in that direction? This young lady back here. Think about this. When we go to these hairdressers, 9 times out of 10, something outside of us pointed us to them, didn't they? A friend. A friend said, hey, you know what? They could probably cut your hair. If you would have just sat there with the belief they could and didn't go sit in their chair, guess what? You would have never known. You'd have never known they could have cut your hair. But because you were willing to believe that your friend believed, you took that and placed it with an action and you went and sat in her chair. And I know through this god-awful time his hair's falling off and you're thinking, oh, she's jacking me up. She's killing me, right? Because my wife's a hairdresser and I didn't let her cut my hair for the first couple years. Because I heard the horror stories about beauty salons cutting men's hair and I just wouldn't go in that route. And I was sitting in her chair, she's cutting my hair, I'm thinking, she's jacking me up. She turns you around, don't she? And points you to the mirror. When you look in the mirror, you got results. You see, faith ain't something you start with. It's an ending of an entire process of action. So if tonight you have no faith, you're in the right place. We don't begin with faith. It begins with the problem and the solution, which brings about an action, which brings about a decision, which brings about action, which brings about results. Without results, you can't have faith in something you can't see. And as she turned me around and I looked in that mirror and I had results, I no longer had to go through my friend anymore to get to that source. I could go straight to it. And the more I continued this process in my recovery, the more I take my belief and I put it in action and I make a decision and I follow it up, I get results. And the more results I get, the more faith I've got. And that's been my recovery, guys. You know, this deal is about living it. This deal is about getting up every day and taking this spiritual kit of tools and applying it. But the good thing about that is when you fail miserably, you got something that catches you. Sweeps you off and don't beat you up and puts you back up and puts you with the people who can teach you the best course of action, right? Aren't you thankful for those people tonight? Aren't you thankful for the band beside you? Aren't you thankful the day that you needed hope the most, there was somebody willing to give their time and give it to you? Where would you be without them? Thank you.